Good morning, members of the Policy Development and Review Committee. My name is Angela Belsham, and I am the Corporate Officer for the SLRD. As your Corporate Officer, I am calling this December 5th, 2024 meeting to order at 11:09 a.m. We would like to recognize that this meeting is being held on the traditional territory of the Lillooet Nation. The first order of business is election of chair and vice chair as required in November of each year by the Local Government Act and the SLRD's procedure bylaw. I would like to thank Director Rainbow and Director Pettingill for holding the positions of chair and vice chair over the past year. Before I call for nominations, I'd like to outline the process we will follow. Starting with the position of chair, I will call for nominations from members. Only one nominator is required. No need to second. The nominee must then consent to the nomination. If there is only one candidate nominated, that candidate will be acclaimed. If there is more than one, a ballot through secret election will be conducted. Ballots will be counted, and the number of votes will then be shared, and the candidate with the most votes will be declared chair. With that, I would like to call for nominations of chair for the Policy Development and Review Committee for the remainder of this year and the year of 2025. Calling a first time for nominations of the chair. Vivian Birch Jones.
Thank you, Ms. Belsham. Director Rainbow, I'd like to nominate you for the chair to continue.
Director Rainbow, do you consent to the nomination?
I'm thinking about it. Okay, yes, I will.
Calling a second time for nominations of the chair. Calling a third and final time for nominations of chair. Seeing no further nominations, I will declare the nominations closed. Director Rainbow is acclaimed as chair for 2025, and I will turn the meeting over to you for elections of vice chair.
Okay, thank you, Angela. So 1.2, nominations for position of vice chair of this committee. A nomination. Vivian.
I'm happy to nominate Director Pettingill if he'd like to continue.
Yes, I'd be happy to. Thank you.
Any further nominations? Okay, how many? I have to say that again. Any further nominations? Third and last time. Hearing none. Chris, you're vice chair.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So could I have a motion to approve the agenda, please? Moved Jenna, second by Vivian. In favor. Motion carries. We don't have any closed, do we, Heather? I didn't see anything. No. Do we have any rise and report? No. Consent agenda. Motion to approve the consent agenda. Moved by Vivian, seconded by Jenna. In favor? No opposed. Motion carries. No business arising. So it gets us to, what happened to number 6? We don't have 7. Request for decision, asset disposal policy. My computer's going nuts here, pinging and ringing. What? Oh, I see. We've got some people coming in. Suzanne. Okay, so who is somebody going to speak to this, or just are you here to? Suzanne, I'll turn it over to you to tell us about this asset disposal policy.
Yeah, so this was a request by the board, I think in 2018, if my memory serves me correct, but somehow got lost from the fuel for a few years and plunked back on my fuel this year. So we developed this asset disposal policy to replace the current minor asset disposal policy that doesn't include all of our capital assets. So this is a one one policy for all of our assets for service assets. Basically, it describes different options for disposing of the asset, and it does have different thresholds within right now regarding the sale. So it doesn't follow the purchasing policy as at the moment, but that can be adjusted. But right now, it's just the sale. We took it a little bit higher threshold than normal, just because Celia has some experience with looking at fraud with asset disposal sales in her previous company, and we just thought that maybe a higher threshold would ensure that those higher valued assets are properly disposed of. It's not a perfect policy at this point. I think we'll have to review it and adjust it as different circumstances come into light. We basically modeled this off of a couple different policies. There's the Cathat Regional District policy we looked at, and there was one other policy. Do you remember, Celia? We were looking at, was it Capital Regional District? But anyway, there was two. You're on mute, sorry.
Sorry. Yes, and another one in the interior. I can't remember right now. CSRD. Yeah.
CORD? Yes.
We're not 100% sure. We can look it up though. But I think CSRD, I don't know what that is.
Central Similkameen.
Okay. And then so there's a certificate to go along with this policy, basically having the department head fill in all the information known about the asset. Then the finance department would go in and check the value that we have, and then any depreciation, and basically give it a off book value, like the net value of our books for these assets. We tried using this policy with the Quint. The Quint that has now been replaced with the brand new fire truck for the Howe Sound East service. So we put it up for auction. I believe we put the sale price at $25,000. That was just based on market. It was hard to find a market value because there wasn't an exact match to anything on the market currently. Do you know how that's doing, Celia? Just curious. Yeah.
It hasn't had any bids and it's
Okay.
expiring today, so we have to renew it.
So maybe we'll renew at a lower value.
Mhm.
But it's the process as laid out in the policies. Basically, the department head initiates, gets the requested approvals, sends it to finance, and they kind of decide how the best disposal method to use. And I'll just open it up for questions. Unless Celia, you want to add some details.
Good. Yeah. No details.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you, Suzanne. Jenna and then Vivian.
Thank you. Through the chair, you mentioned, Director LaFrance, that the approval requirements are a little bit out of sync with our delegated purchasing authority requirements, but they're both based on purchasing, like the purchase cost. So I'm just curious why we wouldn't align those two delegated authorities.
We can. We just felt that it's not a purchase, it's a sale, and maybe we wanted to double check, like have a higher threshold authority. That was it. But we can align them for sure, if that's the direction.
Okay, so just for my committee colleagues for consideration, our delegated purchasing authority expenditures have $100,000 threshold for department heads, $500,000 for the CAO, and then anything above 500,000 comes to the board. In this policy, those are much lower. The set requirements are $10,000 for department directors, $100,000 for the CAO, and then anything above 100,000 has to come to the board. And one piece of work that we've often talked about is around trying to streamline process and provide more delegated authority with the right checks and balances in place. And so just something for my committee members to consider as we review this. It was something that jumped out at me. The other question that I had for staff was the line that reads any proceeds from the disposal of an asset must be deposited to the service that own the asset immediately prior to disposal, which makes good sense to me. And I'm just curious the process within regional district financing. If an asset is transferred internally between services, does one service pay another service for that asset?
Yes, so the chances of this happening, I'm not sure, are very, very great. But for instance, say Britannia Beach Water purchased a pump that was not right sized, or that was somehow purchased incorrectly, but it could benefit, say, Pinecrest Water. Say they had a need for a backup or something, then yeah, that cost, assuming no use has been done, would be just transferred to the Pinecrest water system and benefited, and revenue would come back to the Britannia Beach Water Service. Yeah, like chances of that, I don't know. Like if a service has an asset that's out of, very close to end of life, if we would move it, at that point, but there is a chance that there is a purchase that was not quite right for one service that could work for another.
Thanks for that clarity.
Suzanne, if I could just follow, we actually did that with a van that Britannia Beach Fire Department owned and didn't need anymore, and it went to Seaton, and Area B paid some money to Area D. That was
Okay, yeah. That
and
was a while ago, and that was
Yeah.
kind of different because we don't run that. We weren't, it was a society-run service, so it was really outsourced to that society and owned by that society. So a little different, but yeah, that's an example of something that could happen.
Yeah. Okay. Vivian, did you have something?
Thank you. I agree with Director Stoner that the amounts could be higher in terms of the assessment and when it goes to the CAO and when it goes to the board. That's your call. I wondered when I was reading through it about, the way where you consider disposing of something shall be first offered to other SLRD departments. And I thought, and what about member municipalities and possibly First Nations neighbors, depending on what the asset was, if that was worth considering?
Yeah, that's a good idea. We could add, if internal requirements aren't there, we can look at member municipalities as well as, I think we have other not-profit organizations in there already too. We could add those details easily. And potentially one thing I was thinking about with the thresholds, right now they're based on the original purchase value, and maybe we can change that to be the current market value. So if the current market value is, so it's a little bit more prescriptive of what the sale price might be, but it is also difficult sometimes to develop that market value when there isn't a lot of market for that asset. But that's an option.
You've just given us an example of that with the Quint at Britannia, because the problem with that vehicle is the reason Britannia had to get rid of it is because it no longer meets the FUS requirements. So any other department, they can't buy it because they wouldn't be able to use it. So that really limits the available purchases. And how do you arrive at a value for that? It is useful, but I'm not. What happens? What are we going to do if we get down to the point where we're offering it for $2,000 and nobody buys it? That's possible. That could just sit on that lot for the next 3 or 4 years. What do
I
we do?
wonder if any other, metal recycling would want to purchase it just for the metal within, or some type of other vehicle, using it just as a normal vehicle versus a fire truck, if there's some market out there for that. But yeah, it's a lot of thought process to find out the best way to dispose of it.
And what I've been thinking is we have a machine up in Seaton that was given to us by the municipality of Port Moody. There may have been $1 involved in the title transfer or something like that, but it's basically given to us. So would we consider doing that? Would we consider giving, if we can't get a decent price for that vehicle, would we
Chair?
consider giving it to someone?
Sorry,
Yes.
yeah. We are just talking about the asset disposal policy though, right? So
But well, I guess what I'm getting at is, is there something in that policy that would deal with this situation? I'm just
Yeah,
looking,
I
I'm
think
using that
it
as
does state donate within that policy. There is the donate option that you could just donate the asset if you know somebody would be able to accept that donation as is. And we probably want to create just a little something for them to sign off to say this asset is being accepted as is, basically, with better language, of course, but
But I think I'm looking for a bit about donation. I thought it had a limit to the value, which would exclude something like a fire truck.
It does. I believe it is 2,000. But we could always change that value to in the policy.
Yeah, I don't want to get hung up on that one particular example. I'm just using it as an example to suggest that maybe the policy does need to be changed a little.
sorry, I closed my policy by accident. I'm just trying to find where it is again.
I closed it too, but can I, in the meantime, while you open it, can I add a little comment to the authority levels or the approval levels? I do recognize that we do want to align them and that looks nice. I just wanted to let the committee know that these are aligning with the values that other regional districts are using. And I assessed the risk, and the risk is a little higher with disposals or sales of assets rather than compared to purchasing. And so that's why the levels are lower for the asset disposal policy. So it means that it will go to the CAO and to the board for a lower level than the purchasing policy. And it could be cash involved, and that's one of the risks. And we already have quite a robust process for purchasing, but we don't have a lot of process around this already, and that's why those levels are lower, so that we can follow more what's going on, because we also don't have, because we have a lot of external contractors, we don't have like full overview of what's going on, out in the finance department doesn't have that overview as much. So I do perceive it as a little bit more risky, and that's why the levels are a little lower.
Thank you. Jenna.
thank you for that response, and that makes good sense to me. One of my questions was just what was the rationale for the lower thresholds? And I think the variability in our internal systems around purchasing policies versus disposal is definitely different. I do wonder about the differentiation between using still the original purchase price value versus the sale value. So if something had an original purchase price of $10,000 and it still requires one level of approval, but you're selling it for 1/10 of that, I don't know, it feels, I wonder if it makes more sense to then base it on sale value as opposed to purchase value, or if that's not best practice.
It could, it's often just, it's hard to find what the actual sales value is. So like the Clint is a good example of that. That was purchased for around 50,000. And we don't actually know what the sales value is. We have no bids on it. So it's just harder to like, implement the policy if we don't have like a value to go straight to.
But I guess that's a good point, I think it makes more sense to maybe base it on the estimated market value. Like we have to make an estimate, with every sale. So maybe that's something we could do.
Chris,
Yeah, thanks. Just note that, you can imagine a malicious actor might, if we have $100,000 asset, give it to their buddy for $1, and then it doesn't meet the thresholds of any reporting if we're doing it just on sale value. So I do see some rationale to have the purchase value, and maybe it's if either are above the threshold, the purchase or sale. You don't want to overcomplicate things, but I do see why you might want to consider the purchase value.
Heather, you had your.
Thank you. Director Pettingill did address my concern was it is good to know the original value and base it on that, because it's also an opportunity to understand if the sale value is remarkably low, an understanding of the investments being made and how long their life is and what the resale is. So I think that basing on that, that's really good data informed decision making for the thresholds that are being introduced there. If I might make one additional just clarification, the Seton truck wasn't given to the SLRD. It's not owned by the SLRD. It is the Seton Valley Volunteer Firefighters Association who were recipients of that vehicle.
Yeah, the money still went to the cost center that originally purchased that truck, though.
In Pitt Meadows,
sorry, I'm talking about the one that came from Area D.
Sort of talking about Seton, just a clarification, Seton, this is a public meeting. I want to make sure that we are very clear that that wasn't an SLRD asset.
Vivian.
Thank you, CAO Paul, because I was going to make that point as well. But still, the sort of spirit of what Director Rainbow was saying, and I wondered if we could include, because it talks very specifically that the profits are going to go, so the profit of your whatever you've sold off your office chairs, let's say, I'd like to get away from fire trucks, and if it doesn't fit in that service area or an equivalent service area. So, the washrooms in Area D are pretty uptown compared to some of the outhouses we have in Area B. And I've often joked that we'll take those secondhand ones and bring them up to Area B. For similar purposes, though, like, so if I've got a little community park and you're letting something go in an Area D park, that it doesn't, the profits, if the equipment or the item, maybe that's already covered, but the way I read it was sort of specifically staying within its own service area, but we could have flexibility within the SLRD, within areas, as well as remembering the member municipalities, as well as remembering the neighboring First Nations, all as depending on what's most appropriate, depending on what the item is, right? So, yeah, thank you.
we don't have a surplus toilet right now, Vivian, but if in fact,
I'm
but
standing by.
it could happen in the future. And if it were transferred to an Area B park, then my understanding of this policy would be that we would determine a value and Area B Parks Cost Center would transfer that value to Area D Parks Cost Center.
And everyone would be happy.
Wouldn't we? Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Any other what do we suggested a few minor changes to the policy. I'm wondering what kind of motion we where are we? Angela, what do you suggest here that we send this back to have a couple of amendments and then bring it back to the committee, or?
Thank you. And that would be at the discretion of the committee. They could either bring it back to another policy committee for review, or they could ask staff to make the changes or amendments to the policy as discussed and to bring back to a future board meeting. So either a board meeting or a policy meeting for another review is at the discretion of this committee.
Good, thank you. Jenna, do you have a comment?
I was just going to move that the policy be referred to the board with staff making an amendment to the definition of donation that reviews the resale value for donation items. And I'll speak to it if it's seconded.
Yeah, seconded by Vivian. Go ahead.
So I think that this policy is quite strong and appreciate staff's work on it. It may not be perfect, but I think it's a great starting point, and it puts us much further ahead than we were just a week ago. So it's great to review it. Appreciate you entertaining my questions around the thresholds, and I think that there's good reason and rationale why it's presented as such. I do appreciate Director Rainbow's comments around the thresholds for donations just being a little bit challenging given some of the assets that we might be working with. And so I'm not going to, my motion doesn't have a specific new threshold for donations because my recommendation is just that staff go away and give it some thought and can bring back any updates to the full board as they see fit. I don't think this committee needs to see it again, but just providing a little bit more thought as to whether that $2,000 threshold will be functional given the variety of assets within our portfolio. And then happy to move this forward to the board and on we go. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Chris.
Yeah, thanks. I support the resolution. And I do think, you know, with some adjustment to the donation piece, it's ready for the board. I actually, when I first saw this, I asked myself the question of, I guess for me, this policy did seem fairly straightforward, and we end up having more discussion than I thought we might. But it does make me wonder if there are certain policies that, you know, maybe can go directly to the board and don't need an extra step of review at this committee. In my mind, there are some things around roles and responsibilities and so on where there might be a fair bit more pre-work at this committee and the EAD as well. And so I just want to make sure we're being efficient. And if some policies, maybe it's worth identifying other policies in the sort of list that could go directly to the board. And does that make sense? Bit of a tangent, but just a thought I had going through this one. With that, happy to support this. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Oh, where was that? Suzanne.
That's me, yeah. So I just wanted to clarify. So there was, I note the donation definition to review, and maybe we update it to show also, if there isn't a market and we just want to donate, no matter what the value is, that be reviewed as well. So it might change the total definition. So I don't know if you want to have it back somehow to the policy committee or just straight to the board for that. But then I know that we're going to add municipalities and First Nations with that discussion about nonprofit organizations. We can also, so we're going to add the municipalities and First Nations within the policy as well. And I wanted to double check that the thresholds were good to stay as is. Okay. So it's just those two items so far. Okay, thanks.
I had something I wanted to check too. We discussed market value and purchase value for the thresholds. Did you want that change? Because we have it as purchase value now. But Director Pettingill had a point around considering both. Is that a change or stay as is?
My motion was to keep it as is. I think following our discussion, we all felt comfortable with landing where it is in terms of purchase value. But I do recognize that I didn't include in my motion the inclusion of municipalities and neighboring First Nations into the policy. So if I may add that as a friendly amendment to my motion, if my seconder would appreciate, would allow that.
I would heartily support that.
And I think there is some latitude for staff if as they're going through that, there could be something else that they want to change as they go through. Maybe but I'm quite happy for that to happen and for this to go to the board from here. So if that's basically what our motion is saying. So absent any further comments or questions, I'm going to call the question. Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Suzanne and Celia, thank you so much for your work.
Thank you.
Vivian. Oops. You've muted yourself.
I muted
Oh,
myself.
there you go.
Okay, come on. Reference to this not covering the disposal of land. I am super interested in how we might dispose of land in the SLRD. If we have a policy on that, I'd love to look at that at some future meeting. I get it that in this one you just wanted to exclude it because that's a very different process, but it's one that's I think pretty interesting. So I just wanted to say that, and thank you for all your work on this.
Thanks.
Yep. Yeah. Oh, my goodness me. I'm sorry, I'm having a problem with my computer here. I can't get back to my agenda. Oh,
We're going to look at the calendar next.
yeah, I know, but I can't get, oh, there we are. Good. Okay. So next item, let's, any comments on this? Are we happy with the number of meetings? We've got 5 proposed for 2025. We have, oh, who's that? We have a member of the public joined us.
Motion to ooh and ah.
I'll move the 2025 calendar meeting calendar.
I'd like to second that.
So moved and seconded as presented. Is that what we're saying? Any comments or questions? We all right? I see Raylene sitting there. Oh, Chris, you have a comment?
Yeah, and I think I mentioned it before. It does feel like we have a lot of work to do. I think we sort of discussed that we use this as a starting point. We can sort of add or remove as needed. I just want to make sure, because we come back to, I think, topics that this committee needs to deal with a fair bit at the board level. So I just want to make sure that we are giving this enough attention. But I'm happy to sort of use this as a starting point for that.
Okay. Any? Okay, seeing no more comments, questions, or anything, we seem to be happy with that. They moved and seconded that we adopt this schedule, calendar. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Good. Thank you very much. Now,
Just a comment for staff, if I can. Tony Rainbow, I see Thompson Regional Health Board and Northern Development Initiative Trust are not mentioned, but I'll send those in when they're confirmed to add to the calendar, because it's really nice when we don't schedule over those meetings for the three of us from the northern part. Thanks.
Tony, you're on mute.
there we go. So late business, any late business? Haven't heard of any, so we'll move on to the next thing. No late business. No, I think we've arrived at adjournment. Vivian,
I feel I have to take over that role from you, Tony, and move to adjourn.
yeah. Well, I'll check the rules. I'll check the rules. Maybe I'm a oh, yes, we've got someone down there. Good. Okay, so we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Angela, thank you. Heather, thank you.
Thank you.
Committee, thank you.